Hank Harding hauled his fishing net from the shimmering waves of Cornflower Coast, the late afternoon sunlight dancing on the water's rippling surface. He steadied his small wooden boat, the Dora Belle, named after his late mother. It had been a long day tending to crab pots and lines, but the catch had been surprisingly meager. His weathered hands, seasoned by decades of working the briny waters, tugged the net onto the deck, only to feel an unexpected weight at the bottom. Confused, Hank reached into the tangled lines and seaweed. He emerged with a cylindrical watertight container, a metal canister sealed with layers of old wax. A chill prickled the back of his neck despite the warm sun. He couldn't recall seeing anything like it before. Curious, he carefully placed the container on the seat next to him and steered for shore. The dock, set against the scenic marina of pastel-hued boats, gave Hank its usual gentle welcome. Above the boathouses, the tidy cluster of shops and eateries perched on the hillside, punctuated by the tall spire of the old lighthouse. As he tied his boat, longtime friend and dockmaster Wilma Barnes peered over from her office window. She was a stout woman with grey hair tugged back in a neat bun, well known for her sharp eyes. Not much escaped her notice on these docks. "Find anything interesting?" Wilma called out as she walked over. She was already eyeing the canister in Hank's hand. "I reeled this in," Hank replied. "Weird if you ask me. Looks pretty old, all covered in seals and who knows what else." Wilma leaned in, marveling at the container's battered exterior. Together they pried at the wax. It cracked apart, revealing the faint metal outline and a small latch. With cautious fingers, Hank pushed the latch open. Inside were thick, folded letters, each sealed with an old-fashioned red wax stamp. The seals bore an intertwined anchor and lighthouse motif. The crispness of the pages within belied their age. Some smelled faintly of sea salt, but otherwise seemed preserved. "Do you recognize that symbol?" Hank asked, gesturing at the anchor lighthouse design. Wilma frowned, then shook her head. "Maybe old Cornflower Coast historical archives might have something like that," she suggested. "But let's see what they say." With surprising delicacy, she opened the top letter. Her eyes skimmed back and forth as a mixture of surprise and concern colored her face. She read a few lines aloud. "It says something about the upcoming regatta." "Sabotage? I can't make out this part. Something about sails being tampered with." Hank blinked, incredulous. "Sabotage? At a regatta? The only regatta we have is the annual Lighthouse Cup race. That's 2 weeks from now. This letter's dated from years ago," Wilma observed. "But it sounds serious. Let's read more carefully." She read a chunk about who might be behind it, references to someone called the Silver Hand, and repeated warnings that the saboteur didn't intend for the race to go smoothly. "It's almost like the writer was sending a warning." Hank set his jaw. "I wonder if the sabotage ever happened. And if not, why send these letters sealed in a canister?" "They look like they were never delivered." Wilma tapped the top letter thoughtfully. "They might never have reached the intended recipient. Now it's up to us to solve some old mystery. But maybe, just maybe, this is relevant to this year's event." She shrugged. "We should find out who was behind this. Just because some sabotage happened years ago or was planned doesn't mean we can ignore it." News traveled quickly along Cornflower Coast's waterfront. By the next morning, Hank found himself recounting the discovery to several curious townsfolk. People were abuzz, recalling a time nearly 2 decades prior when the Lighthouse Cup race had faced an unexpected delay. Some said it was bad weather. Others insisted there had been a sabotage rumor swirling, though no official proof had come to light. No boat had sunk, at least not out on that year's course. But people remembered whispered talk of rigged ropes, tampered sails, and suspicious accidents. Yet nothing concrete ever surfaced, until Hank's find. Driven more by concern than curiosity, Hank studied the letters at home in the small cottage he shared with his tabby cat Pepper. On the first evening, he opened them systematically, reading through intricate instructions and dire warnings. The earliest one bore a frantic tone. The writer was desperate to warn an unnamed recipient that the Silver Hand planned to topple the entire event. The next letter included details on hidden compartments in certain boats, references to sabotage techniques like doping sails with acid or damaging lines. Another letter, presumably a follow-up, described attempts to gather evidence. The final letter pleaded for immediate action to stop the Silver Hand, hinting that the saboteur was well respected in town, a person with the power to walk among us unsuspected. The sense of intrigue made Hank's heart pound. He hadn't been an investigator before. He was just a fisherman with an easy, routine life. But something about these letters roused a protective instinct. He cared for Cornflower Coast and was proud of its maritime traditions. If the sabotage was real, and if the saboteur or their allies still lurked about, it could happen again at the next Lighthouse Cup. Quietly, Hank decided to do some discreet investigating. That night, he felt certain Pepper watched him with knowing green eyes. He leaned back on his well-worn armchair and whispered, "We'll find out the truth, won't we?" Early the next morning, Hank visited Minnie Lambert, the town's official historian and archivist. Minnie ran the Coastal Museum, a cozy space filled with maritime souvenirs, old news clippings, and meticulously labeled artifacts. She was a short woman in her late 50s, her distinct crocheted shawl and half-rimmed spectacles giving her the air of a wise, unassuming detective. If anyone knew the significance of the Anchor Lighthouse symbol, it would be Minnie. He showed her the crest from the letter's wax seals. Minnie's eyes widened and she pulled out a dusty scrapbook. Together they flipped through pages of regatta memorabilia. At last, Minnie tapped an old photograph labeled, "Committee Members Lighthouse Cup Race 20 Years Ago." The photograph featured half a dozen well-dressed men and women. In the corner of the photo was a small banner with an Anchor Lighthouse design. "That symbol was used for only 1 year," Minnie explained. "It was 20 years ago, the same year we had that rumored sabotage. The race committee tried to rebrand the event with a new emblem, but it didn't last. I recall that year was marred by all sorts of troubles, late shipments of sails, miscommunication about the route, a near collision 2 days before the race. But in the end, the regatta still took place, albeit delayed." Hank carefully lifted the letters from his satchel. These were supposed to warn someone that sabotage was orchestrated by the Silver Hand. Have you ever heard of such a name in town lore? Minnie closed the scrapbook and pursed her lip. "Not that I can recall. If it existed, it was never recorded under that name, but I do remember a scandal involving a man who was rumored to rig the sails in his favor. Some said he did it for gambling debts. Others said it was jealousy between competing boat owners. The official story was that everything was a misunderstanding, though." "And the man's name? Jameson Quinn?" Minnie said, closing her eyes briefly as if summoning an old memory. "Was quite prominent back then. Owned the Quinn shipyard on the north side of the bay. He donated heavily to the race committees. If sabotage was in the air, he was the first to be suspected. He had sworn enemies and had plenty to gain if certain boats didn't finish the race." Intrigued, Hank thanked Minnie and stepped out into the morning sunshine with a growing sense of responsibility. He hoped he wasn't chasing ghosts, but the letters hinted there was more to discover. The next stop was the north side of the bay. The old shipyard was still in operation, but run by a nephew, Andrew Quinn, a lanky man with watery blue eyes and a cautious smile. Hank found Andrew in the yard's small office going over some logbooks. Andrew blinked and set his pen down, eyes flicking to the letters Hank pulled out. "Some old rumor from 20 years ago," he murmured, glancing at the Anchor Lighthouse emblem. "I was a teenager then. My uncle Jameson died about 10 years back. Never spoke much about sabotage, just that the race committee had become cutthroat, full of backdoor deals. Could it be you're barking up the wrong tree?" "I don't know yet," Hank admitted. "But ripping sails, tampering with lines, that's serious. I was hoping you might have old documents or logs, maybe something your uncle kept at the time. Something that might link him or disprove his involvement. Andrew walked Hank to a tall metal filing cabinet near the back of the office. He rummaged through battered folders. "This is as far back as I go," he frowned, flipping through tabs for 20-year-old schedules and design specs. Tucked away in a corner was a small green notebook. This was Uncle Jameson's personal log from that year. I never paid it much attention. Hank carefully flipped it open. Pages of scribbled boat designs, cost estimates, and references to something called Operation Anchor. The final pages were full of anxious, disjointed notes, meeting times, sums of money, partial references to sabotaged lines. A phrase jumped out at Hank. "Silver Hand threatens to expose." Hank's gut twisted with anticipation as he read details of an extortion scheme. If Jameson didn't pay or assist them, the Silver Hand would sabotage not only the big race, but also the Quinn shipyard. This suggested Jameson wasn't the saboteur, but rather a victim of blackmail or threats. Andrew looked on, startled. So, Uncle Jameson was forced into complicity or risk losing his business? I never heard a whisper of that. It sure seems that way, Hank said. The question becomes, who was the Silver Hand? And what did they stand to gain? Andrew nodded thoughtfully. I always thought Uncle Jameson's abrupt shift in attitude. He withdrew from high society gatherings, became reclusive, was because of family matters. But maybe it was something bigger. This has me unsettled. If there was a ringleader, they might still be around. Over the following days, Hank found himself in repeated conversations about the uncovered logs. Many long-time residents remembered odd happenings that year. Slight accidents, last-minute changes to race rules, uneasy tension among local boat owners. Yet, no one could identify a figure known as the Silver Hand. Rumors floated, maybe it was an out-of-towner, or perhaps an established committee member. Some insisted it was a code name used by a group. Others were sure the saboteur had left town a decade ago. Hank felt no closer to the truth. That week, the annual Lighthouse Cup race preparations were in full swing. Sailors buffed their decks, rigged sails, tested lines, and practiced maneuvers in the bay. Tourists arrived to explore the quaint main street, sample fresh seafood, and admire the colorful spinnakers lining the marina. Tension usually accompanied the excitement, but this year, the talk of sabotage past or present seemed to overshadow the usual festive mood. Race participants started double-checking their boats, paranoid about potential tampering. Detective Paula Reyes from the local precinct, a tall woman with an air of no-nonsense efficiency, approached Hank after she heard persistent gossip about the found sabotage letters. She invited him for coffee at the Lighthouse Cafe to discuss details. Hank brought the canister and letters, hoping for a more official perspective. Detective Reyes examined them, carefully noting the old dates and references. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Harding," she said. "But given this is from 2 decades ago, our ability to act on it is limited, unless we find concrete evidence of a threat to the current race. I'll have my people discreetly keep an eye on suspicious activity." Hank sighed in relief. Pressed to see the matter taken seriously. "Thanks, Detective. If it was thwarted or never fully realized, that's good. But if someone's out there who never faced consequences, maybe they'll try again. I just don't want to see our community hurt." "I understand," she replied. "Keep your eyes open. If anyone tries anything, let me know immediately." Worries aside, Hank still had work to do. Fishing didn't stop just because a mystery demanded his attention, but each time he set out, he scanned the horizon for signs of trouble. A few days before the regatta, he was out on the Dorabelle when a surprising sight met him near Snake Rock Shoal. A sleek sailboat pitched dangerously in the choppy water, its bright teal sail flapping in disarray. Smoke or steam drifted from the stern. Alarmed, Hank maneuvered closer and found the frantic skipper bailing water. Her name was Rosie Trent, a well-known competitor. She shouted in alarm. "Engine trouble?" she cried. "Something with the auxiliary motor. The boat started taking on water." Hank lashed the boats together and helped Rosie. The life pump was clogged, and the engine manifold looked purposefully damaged, with a suspicious slash in one of the hoses. After some effort, they got the water under control enough for Hank to tow Rosie's boat back to the marina. Throughout the ordeal, he noticed a distinct sense of sabotage. Rosie was shaken too, convinced someone had tampered with her vessel. Once ashore, Detective Reyes examined the damaged parts and concluded it was indeed deliberate. A chill spread through Cornflower Coast. Hank considered the significance. Rosie was from an old local family, had no known enemies. Did she threaten a competitor somehow? Was the sabotage random, or carefully planned to send a message? The next day, Minnie, Wilma, and Hank gathered in Minnie's museum library to pore over old race records, chasing any mention of the silver hand. Late in the afternoon, Minnie found a small note buried in the archives. It was an unsigned letter to the race committee from years ago, urging them to tighten security because a rebellious faction calling themselves the Silver Hand is rumored to meddle with the regatta if demands are not met. The letter was never followed up on. Minnie's voice trembled as she read it aloud. It says the group's demands were financial. They wanted partial control of the regatta's profits for some philanthropic front? Hard to make out. The writer warns that the Silver Hand had powerful connections, maybe an ex-committee member or wealthy sponsor. Hank set the page aside. They never got the money, presumably, so they tried sabotage. The question is, why try again after all this time? Silence fell. Eventually, Wilma cleared her throat. Or maybe they never left. Maybe they've just waited for the right moment. Or it's a new generation of saboteurs. If we don't stop them, we could see more accidents. A day before the race, suspicion was at an all-time high. The wharves were thick with tension. Detective Reyes discreetly patrolled. Hank decided to stay near the piers too, ready to catch any sign of trouble. That afternoon he noticed a shifty figure in baggy overalls skulking near Rosie's newly repaired boat. The person was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, fiddling with something under that teak deck. Hank shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The figure bolted, sprinting across the dock and vanishing behind a row of stacked crates. Hank gave chase, only to find empty alleyways and no sign of the intruder. Right on the deck he found an abandoned tool, with the handle engraved with a lightning bolt shape. Hank reported the incident to Detective Reyes, who recognized the tool as specialized hardware used in advanced boat maintenance. She traced its origin to Johnson's Marine Shop, a local outfitter. They paid the shop a quick visit, speaking with the owner, Stellan Johnson. He confirmed he sold that tool type only to a handful of customers. After flipping through receipts, Stellan frowned. "I only sold one of these last week, to a man who introduced himself as Martin Lowe. He had a silver ring shaped like a stylized hand. Seemed nice enough, said he was new in town." Hank and the detective exchanged significant glances. With that lead, Detective Reyes discovered Martin Lowe had rented a small cottage at the edge of town. She assembled a small team and invited Hank to come along, though he kept a respectful distance. When they arrived, the place was deserted. Inside, though, they found maps of the regatta course, notes about structural weaknesses in certain boats, and a collection of old news clippings referencing the sabotage from 20 years ago. Tacked to the wall was an image of the Silver Hand, an emblem in stylized silver foil. The detective's face was grim. It was clear someone was continuing the Silver Hand's mission or had revived the group. With the race mere hours away, the tension ratcheted higher. Detective Reyes organized a watch throughout the night, placing officers at the marina. Hank tried to rest, but excitement and worry kept him awake. He decided to walk along the boardwalk just in case. Pepper trailed at his heels, but meowed in protest at the cool night air. Around midnight, Hank spotted a slim figure creeping among the shadows near the busiest dock. The moonlight revealed a glint of silver on the stranger's left hand. Heart pounding, Hank found a vantage point behind a stack of lobster traps. He watched as the person crouched by the hull of a competitor's boat, rummaging for something in a small kit. Hank recognized them, Martin Lowe, presumably. He had short dark hair and an athletic build. This time, Hank wasn't alone. Detective Reyes had also been patrolling. She emerged silently from behind him, a flashlight in hand. "Freeze!" Reyes commanded, shining the beam on Martin. He leapt up, dropping his kit. Tools clanged to the dock. Martin sprang, attempting to streak away, but Hank stepped in, hooking a foot around Martin's leg. They both crashed to the weather-beaten boards. The detective quickly cuffed Martin, who muttered curses under his breath. In his kit they found more sabotage equipment, solvents to weaken sails, a small blowtorch for cutting lines, and a small bag of suspicious powder. Martin sat sullenly on the dock, his silver ring glinting in the flashlight's glare. "All right?" Reyes demanded. "You're under arrest. Do you want to tell us why you were tampering with this boat?" His eyes flicked to Hank and the detective. "I was finishing what my father started." Martin spat. "Was one of the original conspirators, the one who formed the Silver Hand to sabotage the race. They all chickened out after partial success 20 years ago, but my father's plans were brilliant. The race is a symbol of arrogance, these wealthy boat owners donating pittance to the town while turning huge profits. My father wanted to force them to share more of that profit with struggling local workers." Detective Reyes stared, her expression one of careful neutrality. "Sabotaging boats, risking lives. It's hardly the way to fix a corrupt system." Martin glared defiantly. "It was the only way to be heard. My father never planned on hurting anyone, but they forced him out of town, and now I was going to make sure they finally paid attention." Hank, breathing heavily from the scuffle, felt a swirl of sympathy and horror. On one hand, the sabotage was reprehensible. On the other, he recognized the depth of local rivalries that sometimes left smaller businesses behind. Still, he had to ask, "Is that why you tried sinking Rosie's boat?" Martin's face wavered. "I only wanted to ruin her chances in the race, not hurt her. The damage was supposed to be discovered before she went out, but she took a sudden test run." He looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. Detective Reyes shook her head, expression resolute. "You're under arrest for attempted sabotage and reckless endangerment. Your cause doesn't excuse your methods. We'll sort this out properly." She helped him to his feet and led him away. Hank could hear Martin muttering about injustice, though the wind whipped his words away. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Word quickly spread that a potential saboteur had been apprehended. Despite lingering unease, the committees decided to proceed with the Lighthouse Cup race. Hank was relieved, but he also sensed gratitude from the townspeople. They knew his efforts helped thwart a dangerous plan. The sabotage might eventually have led to tragedy, yet, for now, it was a crisis averted. And so, when the regatta began, the sun glinted on sails of every hue. Families cheered from the shoreline. The old lighthouse, perched stolidly on its rocky outcrop, kept silent but watchful vigil. Hank watched from the docks as the boats glided past the buoy line, the air alive with excitement and relief. Near him stood Minnie, Wilma, Andrew Quinn, and Detective Reyes. Rosie's boat, now fully repaired, cut gracefully through the waves, spinnaker billowing like a joy-filled banner. The spectacle reminded Hank of why he loved his hometown. Despite the occasional storm, literal or figurative, Cornflower Coast displayed an enduring spirit and a commitment to forging on. Later that day, as the last of the boats returned and the award ceremony began, the chatter turned from hush-hush sabotage rumors to the thrill of the race. Children ran along the dock, enthralled by the winners hoisting their trophies. Tourists snapped pictures of the sail-topped horizon. Andrew Quinn expressed relief that the Quinn shipyard name was finally cleared of any suspicion regarding the old sabotage scandal. Detective Reyes exchanged understanding nods with Hank. There would be follow-up investigations, especially regarding Martin's father and any remaining members of the Silver Hand. But for now, peace had returned to the sunlit shores. A few days after the race, Hank sat on his patio, Pepper purring contentedly beside him. Spread across the worn wooden table were the canister and letters, plus Jameson Quinn's notebook and the newly discovered sabotage kit. He gently closed the canister and tucked it away. Perhaps these relics of the past belonged with Minnie for archiving, but he found himself reluctant to part with them just yet. They represented a lesson about the complexities lurking beneath Cornflower Coast's gentle facade. He gazed out at the sea, wave crests turning golden under the late afternoon sun. Even now, drifting gulls circled overhead, and the steady hush of the surf offered comfort. He thanked the waters for bringing him that sealed container. Without it, no one would have known the old sabotage plot was alive again. Until it might have been too late. Fate, it seemed, had chosen him to unravel the mystery. Pepper nuzzled Hank's hand, meowing softly. With a fond chuckle, Hank ruffled the cat's ears. A shift in the wind carried the scent of salt and possibility. If there was one thing Hank had learned, it was that the smallest discovery, like a battered canister in a fishing net, could open a world of secrets. Yet even secrets, once revealed, could help a community stand stronger together, forging a future free from shadows of the past. And he was glad Cornflower Coast would continue to host its beloved regatta without fear, as bright and enduring as the first dawn on its shimmering, storied shores.